You don't expect your very first day in a new home to feel like a courtroom, but that's exactly what happened to Alyssa Trenholm. She had spent 15 years serving her country in the Air Force, dreaming of the moment she could finally buy her own house. But within minutes of her moving truck pulling up, the HOA president, known around the neighborhood as a Karen, stormed over. She didn't ask questions. She didn't welcome Alyssa. Instead, she dialed 911, claiming a black woman was trespassing. Neighbors came outside, phones in hand, waiting to see humiliation. But one powerful ID in Alyssa's wallet turned the entire street silent. Alyssa Trenholm had spent nearly half her life wearing a uniform. 15 years in the United States Air Force had shaped her into someone who didn't scare easily. She had flown through sandstorms in Iraq, endured sleepless deployments, and carried the weight of leadership on her shoulders. She had missed birthdays, holidays, and funerals, all in the name of service. But through it all, she carried one dream in her heart, to one day hang up her uniform, settle down, and finally own a home she could call her own. That dream had not come cheap. Alyssa had saved for years, skipping luxuries, driving the same used cars she bought straight out of basic training. Every dollar went toward her goal. While others chased temporary comforts, she was chasing permanence, something solid, something earned. So when she closed on a modest but beautiful home on Desert Bloom Drive in Scottsdale, Arizona, it was more than a purchase. It was a victory. Her victory. The house wasn't just bricks and mortar, it was proof that sacrifice pays off. It was the place she imagined raising her younger sister when Keisha decided to live with her. It was where Alyssa thought she'd finally be free to breathe. But what Alyssa couldn't have prepared for was the invisible battlefield that awaited her in civilian life: prejudice disguised as neighborhood rules, authority abused under the banner of HOA regulations. She had fought enemies overseas, but she didn't expect to face one at her own front door. The enemy's name was Geraldine Pruitt. 60 years old, sharp-tongued, and immaculately dressed in designer blouses even when watering her lawn, Geraldine had been HOA president for a decade. To her, the community wasn't a neighborhood, it was a kingdom. And she was its ruler. She controlled who painted their fences, how short lawns had to be cut, even which flowers could be planted in front yards. Many residents hated her arrogance, but few ever challenged her. She knew how to use rules as weapons. The moment Alyssa's moving truck rolled down Desert Bloom Drive, Geraldine's eyes narrowed. She saw the black woman in military cargo pants stepping out of the cab and instantly decided she didn't belong. No smile, no welcome. Only suspicion. Geraldine's entitlement told her this: there's no way she could afford a home here. Keisha, Alyssa's sister, sensed the tension before Alyssa did. "That woman's already staring at us like we stole something," she whispered, glancing toward Geraldine. Alyssa brushed it off, focusing on her boxes. Years of discipline had trained her not to react to petty slights. But Geraldine wasn't about to let it go. Within minutes, she marched across the street, her phone already in hand. And just like that, Alyssa's first day in her dream home turned into her next battle. Geraldine didn't waste a single second. With her cell phone pressed to her ear, she paced in front of Alyssa's driveway like she was patrolling enemy territory. Her voice was loud enough for every neighbor to hear. "Yes, officer, I need someone here right away," she barked. "There's a woman unloading things into a house she doesn't own. She doesn't live here. She's trespassing." Her words cut through the calm Scottsdale air like a siren. Within minutes, neighbors peeked through blinds and stepped onto porches. Some whispered. Others pulled out their phones. The street began to buzz as if an event was unfolding, and Alyssa suddenly realized she was the show. Keisha dropped the box she was carrying. "Oh no! She's really calling the cops." "Alyssa, this is about to get ugly." But Alyssa remained still, her eyes steady. Years in the Air Force had taught her to control her breathing in chaos. "Let her," she said quietly. "I've faced worse." Geraldine, emboldened by the attention, sneered. "You can save the act, sweetheart. People like you don't buy houses here." When the officers arrived, they'll see the truth. Her words were dripping with the unspoken, "You don't belong because of who you are." Alyssa felt the sting, but she refused to let Geraldine see her flinch. 5 minutes later, the flashing red and blue lights appeared at the end of the street. 2 squad cars pulled up, their tires crunching against the asphalt. The crowd of neighbors leaned in, anticipation thick in the air. "Here we go," Keisha muttered, her fists clenched. 2 uniformed officers stepped out. Geraldine rushed toward them before they could even take in the scene. She gestured dramatically at Alyssa, her voice shrill and commanding. "That's her. She's breaking in. I've lived here 10 years, and I've never seen her before in my life. She doesn't own this home." The officers exchanged glances. One approached Alyssa, while the other stayed back with Geraldine. "Ma'am," the officer said evenly, "we've received a report that you may be trespassing. Can you provide some identification?" Keisha exploded. "Are you serious? She literally has the keys in her hand. She just bought this house." But Alyssa placed a calming hand on her sister's arm. She knew getting defensive would only fuel Geraldine's narrative. Instead, she reached into her pocket and pulled out her house keys, dangling them in front of the officer. "This is my home," she said firmly. "I closed on it last week." Geraldine scoffed from behind the officer. "Keys mean nothing. Anybody can steal a set of keys. Ask her for proof." "She can't provide it." The crowd murmured. The tension was unbearable. The officer's hand lingered near his belt, not threatening, but cautious. Alyssa could feel every eye on her, waiting for her to stumble. Waiting for the story to confirm Geraldine's version. Inside, her heart pounded, but her face betrayed nothing. She had been trained to stand tall under pressure, and this moment was no different. "Identification, please," the officer repeated. And that's when Alyssa made her choice. Instead of her driver's license, she slowly reached into her wallet and pulled out something far more powerful, her military ID. The laminated card caught the sunlight, its seal gleaming as she placed it in the officer's hand. The officer's posture changed immediately. His eyes scanned her name, her rank, her years of service. He looked up at her, and for the first time since arriving, respect entered his voice. "Thank you for your service, ma'am." Behind him, Geraldine's face drained of color. She had expected humiliation. Instead, she was the one left speechless. The silence after the officer's words was deafening. Neighbors who had been whispering now froze, their cameras still recording but their expressions shifting. Geraldine, the self-proclaimed queen of Desert Bloom Drive, stood rigid, her mouth opening and closing like she was grasping for air. She had expected cheers of agreement, the easy victory she had always enjoyed when enforcing the rules. Instead, she was staring at a woman whose very ID carried more weight than all of Geraldine's petty authority combined. "This is ridiculous," Geraldine finally stammered, her voice cracking. "Military or not, she can't." She looked around desperately for support from the neighbors, but all she found were raised eyebrows and uncomfortable silence. The second officer, who had been standing with Geraldine, stepped closer to Alyssa now. He handed back her military ID with a nod of respect. "Ma'am, you're clear. This is your property. You have every right to be here." Alyssa accepted the card calmly, slipping it back into her wallet. But she didn't stop there. Years of silence, years of watching people like Geraldine wield false power, had built to this moment. She turned to Geraldine, her voice steady but strong enough for everyone to hear. "You called the police on me for moving into my own home. You tried to erase my place here before I even had the chance to unpack a single box. You looked at me and decided I didn't belong, not because of rules, not because of regulations, but because of who I am." A low murmur ran through the crowd. Several neighbors lowered their phones, their expressions softening into shame. Keisha stood tall beside her sister, arms crossed, a quiet smirk tugging at her lips as if to say, "Finally." Geraldine sputtered. I was only doing my duty as HOA president." "No," Alyssa cut her off sharply. You were abusing your position. You thought your title gave you the right to humiliate me. But I've carried a different title for 15 years, Airman. Sergeant. Veteran. Those titles mean sacrifice. Service. Honor. And none of them needed permission from you. The officer shifted, clearly done entertaining Geraldine's antics. Ma'am, he said, addressing the HOA president firmly, you've made a false report. That's a serious offense. I suggest you think twice before wasting department resources again. The color drained further from Geraldine's cheeks. She glanced around, expecting allies, but none came. Even her closest neighbor, who usually gossiped with her during HOA meetings, looked away, embarrassed. Alyssa, sensing the shift, delivered her final words like a verdict. This is my home now. You don't get to decide who belongs here. The days of you bullying this neighborhood are over. For the first time in a decade, Geraldine had no comeback. She turned on her heel, her expensive heels clicking angrily against the pavement, and disappeared into her oversized house. The once commanding HOA president now looked small, cornered, defeated. As she retreated, something remarkable happened. One by one, neighbors stepped off their porches. A man from across the street offered to help carry boxes. A woman with 2 young kids introduced herself shyly to Alyssa, apologizing for Geraldine's behavior. The crowd that had once gathered for a spectacle was now gathering around Alyssa, not as spectators but as supporters. Keisha grinned, bumping her sister's shoulder. Looks like you just won your first battle in this neighborhood. Alyssa smiled faintly, eyes scanning the faces around her. This wasn't just about moving in anymore, it was about belonging. And in that moment, she knew Geraldine's reign was over. The sun had started to dip lower in the Arizona sky, casting long shadows across Desert Bloom Drive. What began as a hostile welcome had transformed into something else entirely. The police cars pulled away, their flashing lights gone, leaving only the weight of what had just happened. The street was quieter now, but not silent. Neighbors lingered, watching Alyssa not with suspicion, but with something closer to respect. Alyssa exhaled deeply, the tension slowly leaving her shoulders. She hadn't realized how tightly she'd been holding her breath until that moment. Keisha was the first to break the silence. Well, she said with a smirk, that was one hell of a housewarming. The line drew small chuckles from a few neighbors. One older man, who had been recording the entire time, lowered his phone and stepped forward. Miss Trenholm, he said carefully, I served in Vietnam. I know what that ID means. Welcome home. If you need anything, I'm across the street. Alyssa nodded, warmth rising in her chest. That was all she had wanted, not fanfare, not special treatment, just acknowledgement that she belonged. One by one, others followed. A woman with 2 children offered bottled water. A young couple asked if they could help carry the heavier boxes. Even the teenager next door, who had been filming with his phone, sheepishly put it away and offered to carry furniture. Slowly, the walls Geraldine had built in this neighborhood were being dismantled, not by force, but by Alyssa's dignity. Inside Geraldine's house, blinds twitched, but she didn't reappear. For years she had thrived on intimidation, wielding HOA rules like weapons, but today those weapons had failed her. The neighborhood had seen her power crumble in real time, and there was no rewinding that moment. As dusk settled, Alyssa and Keisha carried the final box inside. Neighbors waved goodnight, promising to stop by later in the week. The once hostile street felt less like enemy ground and more like the beginnings of community. Keisha closed the front door and leaned against it, shaking her head. Sis, I can't believe she really thought she could get you out with a phone call. Alyssa smiled softly, placing her military ID back into the small drawer by the door. She thought she could decide who belongs. But belonging isn't hers to give or take. She looked around at the bare walls, imagining the home it would become. We've fought for our place before. This is no different. Only this time, we're fighting with boxes instead of boots. Keisha laughed, then pulled Alyssa into a hug. "Welcome home, Sergeant." For Alyssa, it wasn't just about a house anymore. It was about reclaiming dignity in a world that still tried to question it. Geraldine had tried to humiliate her. Instead, she had exposed herself. And the neighborhood had seen the truth: strength doesn't always shout, it stands tall, silent, unshaken. That night, as Alyssa stood by her window watching the streetlights flicker on, she felt the weight of victory. The battle she'd fought overseas had been for her country. But this one? This one was for herself. And she had won. Prejudice often hides behind rules, titles, and authority. Geraldine thought her position as HOA president gave her the power to decide who belonged. But when confronted with truth and dignity, her authority crumbled. Alyssa didn't need to raise her voice or beg for acceptance. All it took was standing firm in her identity, proof of a life built on sacrifice and service, to silence the hate. The lesson? Real strength doesn't come from control, it comes from honor. No one gets to decide your worth but you. If you believe dignity wins over prejudice, share Alyssa's story. Backhand index pointing right. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful true stories.